Final round. Alternative operating systems. What kind of alternatives are available on the market? What kind of alternatives are maybe coming to the market in 2010? So, we have a panel with three guys. Makes it a little bit easier for me. Thank you. So, let's start over here. Aaron, you're from the KDE Foundation. Could you please give us a brief introduction, what you're doing over there at the KDE Foundation, and of course what you guys are doing in terms of netbooks?
Sure, absolutely. So, just so I don't bore anybody, who here has not used a KDE system before? Everybody, that's okay, so some people haven't. All right. Well, KDE itself was started a little over 13 years ago by a university student who thought Linux and free operating systems should have a good user interface. And so they started by making a desktop and a set of applications to go with that desktop. 13 years later, things have grown slightly, and we now offer a wide range of application suites that cover groupware, office productivity, multimedia, etc. And one of the products we offer is a desktop solution. And we started KDE, well, we released the first version of the KDE 4 series of our offering in January of 2008. And with that debuted a new framework for building primary user interfaces, or what the user sees when they first log into a machine or start it up. So on the desktop, that's your panels, your icons on the desktop, etc. And this technology is called Plasma. And the neat thing about Plasma is that it's not specifically designed only for laptops or desktops, these larger form factor devices. It's a framework for building user interfaces that scales from small devices all the way up to large workstations. And one way I often explain to people is when the Linux kernel first started targeting the spectrum of devices, that was new, right? Kernels tended to be purpose-built if it was for embedded OSs, and then we had these really esoteric kernels or operating systems for, say, large-scale computing, supercomputers. And then Linux came along, and it said, well, no, they're all computers. Let's build one kernel that you can tune and build in different ways. And so you have variations on the kernel, but it's the same kernel from your wristwatch device all the way up to the largest supercomputers in the world. And that was kind of a revolutionary step forward. We haven't really seen the same kind of thing happen yet for the graphical user interface. So with Plasma, we can run the software on smartphones. So we've, for instance, got a proof of concept running on the Nokia N900. And that same software scales up. We can run it on netbooks, and we can also run it on workstations. As an open source solution, I think that's really interesting and exciting. One of the things that we do, however, for each of the devices is that we create a primary user interface that is tuned specifically for the use cases of the device, as well as the form factor of it. How big is it? You can't. One of the disappointments I've personally seen with netbooks is they tend to often be seen as just little laptops. And to be honest, they make really crappy little laptops. The screens are the wrong size for it. I don't use my netbook, and I've had one since Asus brought out the original, EPCs. I love them, but I don't use it for what I use my main laptop for. I don't use it like I use my main laptop. Why is the interface exactly the same? And when the netbooks first came out, they didn't have the same interface. So we have been working on a netbook UI built around Plasma, so we can use a lot of the same widgets and tools that we have on the desktop. I have to ask, why do we write a different battery monitor for every device that we ship? That's ridiculous. So we're able to leverage a lot of the effort that happens in the open source community for the desktop, but we've got a UI specific to netbook. And what does that mean? Well, that we look at it and go, netbooks tend to have smaller screens than a traditional laptop does. You're going to be using it a lot more for online usage. Online services are very critical. You're using it for information retrieval. So things like I want to see my email, an overview of my calendar, my schedule. I want to see, my friends on Twitter or Dentica or whatever your social networking site is. And then you want to see the overview, and then go from your overview to a full-fledged application and back again. So the Netbook interface has what we call a newspaper layout, which is a multi-column layout for widgets. A widget being much like what you'd see on an Apple iPhone, right? An app. And then we have another page that you can flip between with a tap interface that allows you to go into a search and launch mode. Yeah, I think of it as Google for a Netbook. It does both online searches as well as searches of your local content and your local applications. So this is something we've been working on, and it's the 1.0 release will happen in January, along with it'll be part of the KDE's software compilation version 4.4. And then, so it's pretty exciting for us. We did a first technology preview of it just the other month, along with Kubuntu. It's not specific to Conoco's products, however, it runs fine on, very well actually, on Mandriva, OpenSUSE, etc. So, and that's again one of the benefits of it is that it's not a vendor-specific solution. It's not owned, controlled, or centrally managed by any one company or corporation, so there's no agenda being driven by it. And so our goal is really to maybe get people to think of these devices as being somewhere on a spectrum, right? Is your device a smart book? Is it a smartphone? Is it a netbook? Is it a laptop or a desktop? And how can we take these user interfaces and actually have them scale well with the device? So that's what we've been doing. We're really excited about the netbook market within KDE because it's exploded, and we hope it continues to explode. And we're really excited to bring a user interface specifically for netbooks.
Let me just give you a little introduction.
I know you're from Mandriva, and you've been also sponsoring this, kind of the host of this Netbook World Summit for the second time. Just give us a little first of all, introduce yourself and give us a little overview of the effort that Mandriva is putting into netbooks and how you see the market and where is your niche for the market.
Okay, well, maybe before I would be curious to know what people in the room want to know. So you want to have the whole story about alternative operating system, or you want to know what we are doing in Mandriva?
Okay, both. We want to know why OS has failed the work of netbooks. Okay.
That's interesting.
Okay, what else? What else? Please. The other ones that are not reading their mails? No?
The benefit of each vendors and suppliers of alternative operating system between the major of each segment inside the smart book, smartphone, or netbooks, or laptops.
Okay, nice.
I would like to know, are you doing any work in what's sometimes called vertical markets? For example, at the FNAC the other day I saw a netbook that's a dedicated kitchen recipe machine. And it's just a netbook with a different interface, but it's marketed entirely as a replacement for a cookbook in the kitchen. And of course, I'm particularly interested in education, but I'm wondering if you're thinking about medical vertical markets or Salesforce vertical markets, things like that.
In fact, concerning the kitchen recipes, personally, I have a personal application, which is my mother. I phone to her to get the recipes, and I find that it is a very efficient system, because she's an excellent cooker. Just. But okay.
That's all?
That's a good start. This is only a 60-minute panel.
Okay. So let's start by the
Beginning.
the beginning. Yes, the big story. So, what about alternative operating system? In fact, for me, I would share into, in fact, there are the generic operating system and there are the specific one. So generic, okay, you have a desktop or you have a server, and basically you want an operating system. So what is new, at least in this market, is that in fact we are going to a generic operating system also for phone. And it was not the case, I think, even 2 years ago, and now, well, except for Windows Mobile. But now we see a lot of nice operating systems that are trying to be very generic and that are adapted to mobile phones. Okay, so generic operating system. And you know what? For servers, Linux is in a fairly good position. Well, I mean that on some part of the server market, for example, supercomputers, in fact, Linux is nearly a monopoly, and I'm very ashamed of it. And I hope we will not be attacked by the European Commission for a dominant position market. I know it is a problem. Nevertheless, even on those markets, it's fairly open because you have many vendors. You have Red Hat and Novel SUSE and even sometimes Mandriva. So it's not so bad. On the server, strictly speaking, well, for web server we are nearly also in a monopoly position, not exactly, something like 70% of servers with Linux or something like that. So it's okay, it's a nice market. And even in companies, when you are looking for figures, what you find is something like 30% of servers that will be under Linux. So not bad. And you have nice questions to top 500 companies saying, do you have a Linux servers? And yes, I think that most have one somewhere for doing something. On the desktop, well, the situation is slightly different. So the market share of Linux is not so bad, between 1.2% and 1.6%. It depends if you are asking the police or the people doing the strikes. Well, it's not ridiculous, because if you think that there are about 1 billion computers on Earth, in fact, a little more now, I suppose 1,200,000,000 or 300 million. So 1.2, 1.6%, it's something like 14, 16, 18 millions of computers, desktop computers on the Linux. It's not ridiculous. It's a market. Okay, so the next time you will have an announce of somebody saying we are a Linux distribution and we have 12 millions of users, maybe you will be a little cautious about the figure, but okay, nevertheless it gives an idea. Okay, and there is Apple, and they have not so ridiculous market share, something like 5% or even a little more, and much more on new computers. Okay, so the problem is that there is a dominant actor that is having a huge market share. If you try to attack it absolutely directly, it's going to be a very difficult job. It is a so difficult job that, in fact, Well, for 11 years, Mandriva is trying, and it's really difficult. If you look in Europe, basically you can go in any shop, in any supermarket, and trying to, in any mall, and try to buy a Linux computer. I say good luck. You can always try. You will not. It's a difficult market. Well, if you look a little around, it is not so bad. So, for example, if you take Brazil, where we have offices, Mandriva have an office in Curitiba, and in fact, there are about between 25,000 and 30,000 computers each month coming out with Mandriva from different people, companies in Brazil. So it's not so bad. It stays difficult. It stays difficult because what is called the platform effect is playing fully for Microsoft. Well, it's playing fully, it's even playing so fully that they have difficulties themselves to go over XP. So that's very interesting. And I'm fairly sure that if today Microsoft was continuing to sell XP, there would be people buying it instead of 7, even if, okay, 7 is what you want. Okay, that's for generic operating system. Tough market, difficult. But there's a place for a lot of... there are a lot of places where you need an operating system. There are a lot of machines, gadgets, and in fact there are more and more. And if you look at Linux, if there is a place where Linux is a big success, it is embedded system. It's very surprising to some extent. At least 12 years ago it was not clear it would be the case, because Linux is a very big operating system compared to what is usually used in a lot of embedded systems. But what we are seeing is that our friend of Qualcomm is there. In fact, even the most basic processor today has an incredible power, computer power. So it is possible to have operating system fairly complex and very cheap. So it means that we see Linux. Linux is in many places today. You see Linux in DVD reader, DVD player. You see Linux in TomTom-like devices. You see Linux in e-books, for example. You see, basically, you see, if you need a network connection and a graphical interface, well, you end up with Linux, because there's not many choices, in fact, at a cheap price. At a cheap price and with the possibility to totally control what you have in your device. So that's how Linux is developing today. I think there's something else that is now becoming very important. It is the possibility to have a good web browser. So you need absolutely, in any device, it's going to be a given that you have some possibility to interact with the web, and most of the time you really need a web browser. So I'm fairly sure that, for example, ebooks will have some kind of web browser built in. It will be special web browser, it will be, okay, adapted, but you need it. And in this case, if you need an operating system, network connectivity, drivers, and graphical interface, and a web browser, so really you have no more, well, you have some choices, but finally it's going to end up with Linux, because it is the cheapest, and it is the one you can try just in going on internet and taking it. You have to ask nobody. So it's the easiest path. So it means that in this case, the future, the present, and the future's Linux is absolutely marvelous for this kind of devices. Okay? You want? No. Okay.
Can I add something to the? When we talk about the generic platform and whatnot, one of the problems we have as an open source community is we tend to look at the holes in our socks, and that you can't see because our shoes are on. We go, we have a hole in our sock. You can't see it, but I tell you it's there, regardless of how good the suit we're wearing. And what the effect of this is I find we often undersell ourselves or forget to tell people about some of the successes we are having. So when someone, the comment often is, well, why have the alternative operating systems failed on the desktop? And there's definitely a platform effect. But you also have to remember that on the desktop, it's free software is very much disturbing the status quo. And when you have a technology that comes in and is disruptive, it doesn't tend to manifest uniformly. In fact, it never does. So one of the metrics we look at is, are we growing year over year? And yes, we are, and significantly. You mentioned Brazil. So this past year, there was a very large deployment that was completed in Brazil. Brazil's a very young country. Something around a third of the people in Brazil are under the age of 20. It puts about 52 million students in their public school system there. Every one of those schools is now using Linux on the desktop to teach their students. That's 52 million students across that country. It took them 2 years to do the rollout, as you can imagine. The Gran Canarias, we have a similar situation where the school system is also using Linux. We service around 250,000 students there. And both, was that?
Don't forget.
Yes. So there's a number of these educational scenarios where we're servicing 6 to 7 figures at a time in countries. We have wins such as the Tax Authority of Lower Saxony in Germany, the City of Munich, etc. What we're not getting good penetration in is the mainstream consumer in the West. So what happens is Microsoft comes out and says, oh, we only have 2% or 1% of the netbook market, which is crap, to put it straight. Then other numbers come out and goes, well, no, we have like 32%. How does that work? Well, it depends on whether you want to count the whole world or only the people in the West. When you count everyone around the world, it turns out that Linux still has around 32-33% of the netbook market. So I don't think we've failed at all. I think in what is our hardest market to see any sort of penetration, not only are we growing year over year, we're seeing some significant deployments, and we're seeing significant market share in new areas of the market, such as netbooks. So while we're doing remarkably good, yes, on embedded and servers and whatnot, we're not doing nearly as bad as one might think on the generic platform as well.
I do agree. I think that what we can say is that to win, we have to change the rules. We have to play another game. So in fact, to play another game, and in fact that's what we do when we win. So to play another game is basically, for example, if you change the form factor, Linux is doing well. I think that it was the reason why Linux was the first operating system for netbooks. It was changing the form factor. You need something else. So Linux is easy to adapt, to change, to modify, and then you get it. If you go to mobile phone, we see that Android is going very strong, and that's very good. So on ebooks, it's going to be the same. It's going to be Linux. It's obvious. So that's the first way to change. If you change the game, we win. The other one way I think we can win, it is if you change the way you sell computers. So today the sales, okay, they are direct sales. If you go to operators, it's going to change. If you go to telco operators, if telco operators really start to sell computers, it's going to change, because they will want to have a full control of the computers. And I think it's much easier to do on Linux computers than on Microsoft computers. So that's the other way, and I think it's coming, going to come. We have to be ready for that. and to propose it. The third way is to have vertical markets, and education is a vertical market, as was asked before. So on vertical markets, when you have the full control from one end, the servers, to the end user, yes, Linux can do very strong, very good. And that's the way we can do things.
So I'd say, to the...
First of all, Ash, I'm sorry about this. We had a little monologue going on.
I wasn't going to interrupt.
Sorry. If you could just please introduce yourself and maybe give us a little status update of the program.
Oh, sure. Happy to. So I'm Ash Javeri. I'm based in London, and I work for Google. And I can talk a little bit about Chrome and Chrome OS. I guess I'll start. How many people have used Chrome, the browser, out there? Okay. Has anyone actually compiled and built a Chromium OS machine since we've released it? 1.5. Two halves, so I'll assume the builds didn't fully compile. I'll take a bit of a step back, and I think to your point, something else that sort of helps change the game, I think, is the internet and the web. We built Chrome, the browser, and launched it about 14 months ago. The question at the time was, does the world need yet another browser? Why? The way we thought about it, and it's actually a very similar way that we're thinking about the operating system and a lot of different things, is most of the web browsers out there today even were built about 15 years ago, right? I think we talked about this earlier today, where basically what you were doing online was displaying static HTML pages, maybe some images. If you're a great web developer, you had a hit counter, right, or some marquee scrolling text. And if you fast forward 15 years to today, what are people doing online? They're building spreadsheets, they're uploading pictures, there's Facebook, there's an entire array of very rich web applications. And it turns out that most of the browsers that were built to really display text and display pictures aren't that great at enabling rich web applications. And so we took a sort of a step back looking at this trend, or these sets of trends, and said, if we were to design a browser today, what would it look like? How would it interact? Things like different security models, things like very, very fast JavaScript rendering. And so when we thought about Chrome, we had Chrome the browser, we had three specific kind of design principles in mind. And those were speed, simplicity, and security, but mostly speed. For those of you who've used it, you probably notice that it's lightning fast. The JavaScript actually right now is about 40 times faster than that in Internet Explorer. And if you try rich web applications, anything from Google Wave to Zoho Docs, I think you'll notice a performance difference between the different browsers. And so we focus very much on speed, but also end-to-end speed, right? So making sure when you click on the icon, it boots very quickly, the browser starts very quickly. When you interact with it, it's snappy. When you close it, it closes down very quickly. All the data that we have internally shows that latency matters, and speed is the #1 driver of consumer satisfaction. And so, we took the browser, we put it out there. We have about 40 million users today, 40 million active users on the browser today, and those numbers are growing. And the other thing that we've done along with the browser, and this sort of plays into the operating system and to the web and applications, is we're very much focused on HTML5, and we believe that HTML5 will help sort of lay the foundation of rich web applications, right? Today, if you're a web developer, it's very hard to access the underlying hardware on a machine. You can't really access the graphics processor unit on your machine. So if I want to build a rich game today, I'm more or less stuck to the desktop, right? If I want to access the webcam and the speaker and the microphone and all these things, I'm still very much bound to the desktop. If I want to use multi-core processors, I can't do that because I can't spawn multiple threads through my web app. So, there's a whole host of these different things that HTML5 is working on to really push the web forward and really enable the next generation of web developers. And that's also part of the reason why we built Chrome and why we sort of push it forward. So, and then looking at the trends that we've all been talking about, right? So I don't think I need to tell anyone here about the rise of netbooks, the convergence of hardware, or the fact that hundreds of millions of users are using all these different web apps, right? Think about over the last 5 years how many desktop or conventional applications
have had 100 million users using them, like a Facebook or a Gmail. I mean, I can think of very few that come to mind. So if you take these three trends and you kind of rethink it and say, if I were to design an operating system today, what would it look like, right? And our answer to that is Google Chrome OS, which is an operating system with a browser at the core. And the entire thinking is there is absolutely no applications to install, right? So everything is a URL. There's no click here to download, double click setup, setup.exe, you run it and install it. As the web becomes more and more powerful and as connectivity becomes more ubiquitous, we believe that everything will move to the web. It's just a better development platform for developers and a better model for consumers.